Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Meredith Gershenson. I'm a research analyst here at workforce.com. And today, as the title suggests, we're going to talk a little bit about how to schedule well understaffed. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Ryan. She is the founder of the Grategy. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Lisa is an award-winning speaker and best-selling author of 11 books. She works with her clients to develop employee and client engagement initiatives and strategies to keep up top talent and best clients from becoming someone else's. I love that. Lisa, I'm so excited to have you on. I think this is going to be a really great and topical issue that you can help walk us through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And then to quickly walk everybody through our Big Marker webinar platform. On the right side, we have a chat box. I would first love to hear where everyone's dialing in from, just to get acquainted. So I'm coming in from Chicago. Feel free to throw in where you're dialing from. And there you can throw in any questions you have, any comments. We love to hear you guys engage with one another. It's really great. For the questions, we will tag the questions. We have a Q&A at the very end of the webinar. So I just highly encourage questions throughout, and we'll be sure to answer them at the very end. In addition to the questions and the chat box, we do have poll questions throughout the webinar. So those will just pop up right on the bottom left of your screen. Again, it's a really good way for us to engage with you guys, see where your head's at, all that good stuff. And then finally, we do have an audit for everybody. It'll just help measure your organization's scheduling protocols. If you fill that out, we are offering a lucky winner and a $100 Amazon gift card. So be sure to keep an eye out on your inboxes if you do fill that out. And that will be handed out at the very end, just as a reminder. And then finally, if you are a SHRM member, we are offering a SHRM PDC with this webinar. So if you stick around for the whole thing, I will share the PDC ID at the very end of the webinar. So be sure to stick around for the webinar's entirety. And then finally, to give a little bit of background on workforce.com, we are a workforce management software company who specializes in scheduling and time and attendance. And really our overarching goal is just to help business leaders and frontline managers make the best decisions for their company. Cool. So now we got all that out of the way. This is so cool. Thank you so much, everybody, I love it. We have Fred coming in from Chicago. That's great. We got some people from Toronto. I love it. That's awesome.
So I saw Cairo, Egypt is in the house.
Wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
we have some international viewers. This is awesome. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, feel free to just drop in those questions in the chat as we go about. So Lisa, first and foremost, tell me some of the work that you do specifically with hourly workforce.
Sure. I speak to a lot of associations as far as helping their members keep their top talent from becoming someone else's. And then a lot of times I'll get invited into organizations from people who have seen me to go in and work with their hourly workforce. And it's always interesting because I had one client, they were a manufacturer. They had me come in to do 5 programs. There was 1 for managers and then 4 for the hourly employees. And the hourly employees were you could feel that they were like, oh, here we go again. Yep. Some person's going to try to come in and, squeeze more blood out of us and all this kind of stuff. And when I made the program specifically about them, because we worked on gratitude strategies with them. So it's really focusing on those hourly workforce to let them know that they're valued, that their efforts are appreciated. And it is about them, because if you can give them strategies to find the good when everything's going on, when they can find the positive, when they know how to communicate better at work, then they bring that better, kinder person into the workplace, and interaction by interaction, we can change that workplace.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, we'll dive into more on exactly how to change it from its core perspective, right? And I think that's really
Right.
important. We have a lot of people here coming from HR, operation management perspectives. So it's always hard to feel like you're the middleman making the biggest change in the company. So we'll kind of dive into that later. We actually sent out our first poll question of the day. So I asked, what industry do you work in? We're getting a couple people in hospitality, a couple people in retail. For those that are saying other, I would love to hear specifically what industry, and so we can be able to speak on that a little bit more. But this is great. Feel free to keep filling that out. And then we do have, kicking us off strong, we do have our first slide of the day as well. So this slide is really just highlighting, some of the industries that are dropping in their quit rates as of May 2022, according to this graph from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, some Bureau of Labor Statistics data here. And then, while other industries such as leisure and hospitality are actually on the rise. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this graph in particular, and if there's any insight as to why some industries might be dropping while some are rising.
Well, and a lot of ones, when you're looking at, for example, retail and hospitality, these were industries that were shut down or they went to a minimum staff. And as some of these company owners started to say, hey, we can get away with a smaller workforce, let's just not bring back the same number of people. And now we have our employees who are just getting burned out. Right. I mean, absolutely burned out. And we're seeing, and it's just so funny, in the last 2 weeks, the silent quitting. Every conversation that I have had come up lately, at some point we talk about silent quitting, and that these employees who are burned out, who are not feeling appreciated, who are not seeing, even though some of them are begging management and begging ownership, we need more people. We got to have more people. We can't do this on our own. And they're just kind of saying, okay, you know what, if they're not listening to me, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my job, and that's it. I am not giving an iota of effort more than I am being paid for. And if that continues, that quitting's not going to be so silent, because people will actually take their skills and leave.
That's a good point. And, I think with a lot of hourly workforce, it's hard because a lot of the people that are working are typically in that teenage years. A lot of them are 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And it's hard to kind of excite them about things like that and really get them to fully apply themselves. So that leads me actually to my next question. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that are impacting the U.S. labor market that we can point to?
Well, besides the burnout rate, again, it's not feeling appreciated and valued at work. And people, managers tend to pay attention when things are going really well. We just broke all our records, or they're going really poorly. But when things go just swimmingly, according to plan, it's like, well, why should I thank my employees? I mean, they get thanked every Friday for doing their job. And so to my audiences all the time, I will say, so is it important for you to thank your employees for doing their job? And the answer is a resoundingly yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories, and an audience member shared this with me. She was 15 years old and she was working at a movie theater. Okay, which is a really cool job when you're 15, of course, working well. But every day when she came to work, her manager thanked her for coming in. And every day before she left, her manager thanked her for putting in a good day's work. This woman is in her 50s, okay? This happened 30 some years ago, and she still remembers that simple act of that one manager acknowledging her and thanking her just for showing up. Because when people feel that value, you know what? That goes with them and they stay.
We actually had a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this exact topic. We were trying to figure out how to lower absenteeism rates. And we talked about, that human-centric approach that a lot of HR obviously comes from. And it's really hard to get numbers on that. But what does go a long way is with that human-centric approach is approaching it from that personable perspective, on giving thanks, on giving gratitude, on those words of affirmation. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what's going to keep employees loyal and on board.
Right. And it's being specific.
Mm,
People will ask me all the time, well, can you overthank people? Or they think that if they say thank you too much, the employees are going to get cocky and not think that they have to work.
right.
And actually, the opposite is true. Because if you say, hey, thanks, great job, that employee's like, what was so great about it? And
Mhm.
what are you thanking me for?
Yeah.
But instead, if you say, you know what, I really appreciate the fact that you stayed over an extra 45 minutes to help us get this order out. It means a lot to the company. We were able to satisfy our customer. So you're showing that employee how they are a part of the bigger piece of the organization. You're recognizing them. And even if they're getting time and a half overtime because they put in the extra 45 minutes, you're still acknowledging them, which
Mm,
also means that next time when you need somebody to put in a little bit of overtime, they are much more likely to say, sure, I can help out, because
right.
they know that you recognize it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. When we talk a little bit about those main key players in any organization, we're talking operation managers, HR, general managers, floor managers, anyone like that. What are some of the key components or the main role that they play in combating staff shortages? Is there any specific role that you could point to in helping combat more than the other?
I think that it's really that human connection.
Mm,
You know, one of my side hustles, I teach HR law, not a lawyer. Don't ask me to do that. But I tell the people who take my programs, when HR goes through a facility, there's one of two responses. Oh no, HR's here. Who's in trouble? Who's going to get fired? Or,
right.
hey, HR, how you doing?
Hmm.
And you want to be that second one, because no matter what role you're in, we all play a role in that level of engagement. So you know your employees by name.
Right.
Simply sometimes when I've had and again, a lot of my audiences are manufacturing. So you have these guys walking through the plant, and the simple fact of stopping by and saying, hello, how you doing today?
Right.
Knowing the employee by name. And then it also, just by saying hello, a lot of times you can figure out, is that employee having a good day or a bad day?
Mm,
And if a normally chipper employee is kind of like, you're like, hey, how you doing? Okay. You can either breeze to your office because, we're busy, we got stuff
right.
to do, or you can stop by and say, you know what? What's going on? You're not your normal self today.
Yeah.
And you don't know if that employee was thinking about, you know what, I'm out of here.
Right.
I'm putting together my resume. I'm done. But because you stopped and said hello and
Hmm.
said, what's going on with you? You're not your normal self. Maybe that employee's like, you know what? I actually really like it here. They care about me and they choose to stay, because
Yeah.
none of us know what's going on in the minds of our employees. The other thing, too, from a role standpoint,
Hmm.
is making it safe for everybody to express appreciation. Because if I reported to you, Meredith, and I went up to you and I said, Meredith, I just love working for you. You're like my favorite boss ever. If my coworkers are saying, oh, there's Lisa sucking up again, what's she trying to get this time? Managers need love too. Okay.
Yeah.
So we create that safe environment where employees can recognize managers just as well as managers can recognize employees.
Mm,
And peer-to-peer recognition, not only does that make a huge difference, but you also have this level of built-in accountability, because now that total slacker who slacks off when you're not around as a manager, they see, wow, my colleagues can actually appreciate and recognize me. So now maybe they're more accountable in
yeah.
what they're doing. So it's a whole culture change when we just look at those interactions that happen all throughout the day.
I think that's a really good point, and it impacts more even from the frontline employees, the lower level employees, to the mid managers, or even the upper mid managers, VP types, to all the way up to C-suite, actually, because if you are in the C-suite realm, or you're a president, or you're just upper management, you can also be giving that same feedback to your managers who are on the floor, or even all the way down to the frontline employees. There's no boundaries there when it comes to showing that gratitude and that aspect of appreciation.
Yeah.
Lisa, to kind of follow up on some signs of low employee engagement, are there any, telltale signs that HR managers, anyone else can look out for?
Yeah, starting early. Again, because you can feel culture. When you walk into a restaurant, when you walk into any facility, you can feel, number one, do the employees like working there?
Right.
Start from there. But if you notice that employees are not participating like they used to, they're not volunteering as much as they used to, even on different committees or putting together parties or being involved in the social activities, when you're noticing them withdrawing, when the quality of their work is going down, or before that there is a change in the work that they're doing. Maybe they were doing excellent work before and now they're just doing average.
Yeah.
You're not seeing the relationships being built. One of the things that Gallup says is that when you have highly engaged employees, they have a best friend at work. They don't say good friend. They don't say people I tolerate. They say best friend. So that's what we're looking for, is those human connections, those friendships. And it's not like the workplace has to be, happy, joy all the time.
Right.
But we know that there's things that people like to do. And one of the best things, I know a lot of companies are starting to implement this, but instead of exit interviews, to focus on stay interviews. What keeps you here? What do you like about working here? What would cause you to leave? How can I do better as your manager? What resources do you need? Sometimes it's just having the conversation that can keep that employee from leaving. But I always say, again, in my audiences, I think that a lot of times an exit interview is a little late. Hey, why are you leaving?
They're already both feet are out the door. They're done.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing you can do now, where with the stay interview, maybe there's a chance that you'd be able to keep them.
Yeah, definitely. Charmaine had a really good point she said in the chat, creating an environment of belonging is really kind of what it comes down to. And I really quickly wanted to shout out, Adrian asked a question. Adrian, we have tagged your question. We'll be able to get that to the end. For anyone that else has a question, feel free to throw it in the chat box and we'll tag it and definitely be sure to answer that. I think those are really great points, and it's something to constantly kind of keep in top of mind. And it's hard because getting metrics for HR, getting numbers behind that kind of stuff is really hard. And to be able to measure, okay, how has my employees' engagement been over the course of the past couple months? To measure that is very difficult unless you're constantly writing something down. Something that we do really well at workforce.com is we have shift feedback features where, it sends an automatic, essentially a quick survey after each shift, just to get a sense of where their head's at. And you can literally measure, you can kind of get a gauge of where each employee is at. And it can also be weekly or monthly. I'm sure people have some sort of implemented surveys that they do with their staff on some sort of continuous timeline. But it's something that's really key. And we see a lot of people using these surveys to just better their overall engagement, lower absenteeism rates, lower burnout. Everything that kind of falls into place definitely falls under that. So getting those metrics is very, very crucial, I would say.
And not only getting the metrics, but acting on them, making sure that your managers have the resources, because you're using the service, you're giving the surveys. But if employees are never seeing anything as a result of the information they shared, they're going to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, if managers don't have the tools that they need, or they do a survey and then they don't hear anything for 8 months because they're compiling the data, it's kind of a waste of breath. So yeah, those weekly surveys where you're just keeping a pulse on, and no matter what happens on the survey, your only response is, oh, thank you for sharing.
Right.
Thank you for sharing. You're not arguing, you're not justifying, you're not doing anything but looking for that kernel of truth. Because even if you have the most grouchy, toxic employee, and you're going to have some of those people, they're just having a bad day, so they're going to give you a bad survey result.
Right.
Some of them you can take with a grain of salt, but for the most part, it's thank you for sharing. What can we change? What can we do better? You see a negative glass door survey. You can either ignore it, or you can go on and see what's the grain of truth and how can I respond so that potential employees who are looking at those reviews are going, oh, okay, management's actually paying attention to what employees are saying.
Definitely. I think that's a really good point. And, we sent out a poll question a little while ago, and I asked who in your organization is responsible for maintaining employee engagement. And majority are saying GMs or managers. And, I think it's really hard because they already have so much on their plate that the last thing that they probably are even thinking about is maintaining employee engagement. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's something, it should be automated. It should be an easy process. It shouldn't be something that should take too much of their time because, those HR type person-centric approaches or protocols are really hard to maintain and really hard to get a gauge of. So, for those who are on the front lines, those managers, hats off to you. And, hopefully things like workforce can make your lives a little bit easier.
Yeah. And you definitely need that buy-in from the top. Sure. If the C-suite or the ownership is saying, that's an HR thing, it's not my problem, go engage our employees, not going to happen.
Right.
Not going to happen.
So true. Very true. We have this next slide here I wanted to quickly touch on. It's talking a little bit about some survey results, frontline staff emotional experiences. And we're seeing, in 2021, there was a pretty steady uptick from 2020 pandemic levels, 2021, and I'm assuming 2022 would probably read the same. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this graph in particular.
When we look at the uptick in negative emotions, I mean, really, it's all, you can't look at social media, you can't look at the news. I mean, we are just being slapped on all sides. And with the pandemic that we've been going through for 2.5 years, it's difficult to find the good. So in my programs, my company is Grategy, which is gratitude strategies. And I actually started it as a result of my practice of gratitude that I started in 2009 with a couple friends. But when you take the time, and this is something I write down 5 sentences every morning, what I'm grateful for, being specific. I am grateful for Scott cooking a great dinner last night, whatever it is. But the simple act of writing it down, what science shows us is that over time, it rewires your brain to go for the good, to find the good. And this isn't necessarily like I'm saying, oh, it's all about put on this happy face and all of that. It's feeling the rawness of whatever our emotions is, that sadness, that anger, depression, whatever it is we're going through. But as we get done with the rawness of that, to see, okay, what's one good thing? Just one good thing. I always, as a speaker, I always joked about the fact that nothing bad ever happens. I just get new material.
Yeah.
But after 13 years of a gratitude practice, my brain is literally rewired. So I have had customers, clients doing this, a golf course for their hourly staff, and for all of their people, they put a ledger by the time clock, and employees would punch in, and then they would write down something they were grateful for.
Right.
I have a manufacturing plant that they make plastic containers, and they made a big clear plastic box they put in the middle of the shop floor. And at their meetings, their weekly meetings, people would write down the things they were grateful for. They would choose like 4 or 5 people to share, and they would put it in this clear plastic box. And as the year went on, you could physically see those notes growing.
Right.
Other clients simply starting meetings with people sharing 30 seconds of good news, either personal or professional. So that we get to know each other. So there's so many different things that we can bring into the workplace to focus on positivity. And again, it's been a rough couple of years, but when you get into a practice, So I say, and it's actually kind of funny because I recommend taking my 30-day gratitude challenge, that you do this for 30 days, write down 3 to 5 things every day for which you're grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, I used to do an official 30-day gratitude challenge, and there was like videos and all this stuff that went along with it.
Right.
At the end of it, people would be like, "Oh, I'm so sad that the challenge is over. I really liked keeping track of my gratitudes." And I'm sitting there thinking, that was part of my evil plan, people. You get used to keeping your gratitudes, and then you continue.
Yep.
And there's other people say, "Oh, I used to keep a gratitude journal. I got out of the habit." And we do,
Mm-hmm.
even I get busy and get away from it. But what happens is basically you forgive yourself, you move on, and you just keep doing it. And there's going to be some mornings that you wake up and you're like, I got nothing.
Right.
That's the nice thing about the gratitude journal, is that you can turn back a couple pages and remind yourself of the good things that happen. I mean, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. It is a beautiful, picture perfect day. Blue, sunny skies, low humidity. That was in my gratitude journal today. So
Yeah.
it's not like it has to be these big things that happen,
Mm-hmm.
but we train ourselves to find the good, and that's what works.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you I'm really grateful for this coffee right now. This conversation happening. It's starting small. I totally
Yep.
understand that. To go off of these negative emotions, and I wanted to highlight Isabella's comment in the chat. She said, in our organization, I see more negative emotions from all of our staff, from managers to cashiers. And I think that, Isabella, you're definitely in the majority, and I could assume
Yeah.
that a lot of people would be in the same boat. Lisa, to go off of that, what are some strategies, whether it's gratitude journaling, anything kind of similar to that, what are some strategies that you work with clients in implementing to help reduce burnout, turnover, absenteeism, that all kind of stems from those negative emotions?
Yeah. It's tough, because I think, and I have noticed this in the last couple of years, and as a person who speaks on gratitude, it's difficult to admit, but it just seems that people are less kind
Mm,
than they used to be. And the thing is that we don't know what's going on, that what's happening in their lives, if they're dealing with, uh, immunocompromised people at home, or aging parent issues, or sick kid issues, or anything. We don't necessarily know why. And people are frustrated because, now you're going to restaurants and there's a 45-minute wait and it looks like half the tables are empty because we
mm,
don't have the staff. So there's a level of empathy that goes along with that. But one of the studies that I really like, the Institute of Heart Math, which is out of California, takes a look at our emotions and how it impacts us physically. And they did a study that took a look at anger and compassion and its impact on the immune system.
mhm.
And this is a shocking statistic, because what this study found is for every 5 minutes you spend in anger, you actually reduce the effectiveness of your immune system for
Hmm.
6 hours.
Wow.
Hours.
Wow.
So all those people that you are letting live rent free in your head, they're killing you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, those same 5 minutes spent in compassion actually elevate the performance of our immune system for those 6 hours.
Hmm.
So it's a choice. If you remember that no one can make you mad, just like no one can make you happy, we
Hmm.
choose our emotions. And when we can go through and just kind of look at things of from a point of compassion, you don't know what happened to that person 5 minutes before they got into your line, in it's a cashier ringing up the order. You don't
Right.
know what was going on with that person 5 minutes before. And I know there's a lot of disrespect going on. And, hopefully when that happens to our hourly employees, we have managers who have the employees' backs.
Mm,
We're willing to fire customers who are being disrespectful and unkind, because we want to show our people that, we have their backs, that they're valuable, and that we want to keep them. So again, you're choosing your employees over sometimes these customers that are just unkind and disrespectful, and we can't
right.
tolerate that.
I think that's interesting. especially in a lot of American companies, a lot of American culture, there's this idea of the customer is always right. And I think that's it's a correct statement to an extent.
Right.
But I think when it comes to the idea of compassion, idea of loyalty, idea of talking about negative emotions versus positive emotions, it's really important that you are there and your employees know that you're there supporting them. No
Right.
matter, how rough of a day it is, whether it's in the office, whether it's, at a cash register, whether it's at home in your personal life, it's important that there's that cultural aspect, and culture is tossed around a lot in today's world where nobody really knows what it means anymore, and everyone's idea of culture is super different from the
Right.
next. But it's still really, really key to implement the best way. And truly, what good culture is just being that compassionate human and being someone that can be approachable.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's this basic human connection. For 2.5 years, we lost that. I mean, I speak at a lot of conferences, and this year, I mean, a lot of these people, not only were the association members not getting together, but their spouses weren't coming to the events either, and they missed their friends. So there's this joy in getting back together after 2 years where we're seeing record attendance happening and people just so glad to be back together. But there's still this level of fear, like, oh, when's the next shoe going to drop?
Right.
But it is about that connection, that empathy, that building relationships, being kind to each other. But I will tell you, having some kind of gratitude practice is absolutely 100% life changing. It starts from a personal basis. You do it for you. And then now you're bringing that kinder, more grateful person into the workplace. And moment by moment, we can change that culture.
So, before we move on to the next section here, I would love for you to kind of walk the audience through on how to maybe implement that in the workplace, from manager to frontline staff.
Well, the first thing is the level of accessibility. It's not something that we talk about as much when we talk about leadership, but making sure that you in leadership roles are accessible. When we look at, and I have a generational program that I do as well, but when you're looking at younger employees coming in, younger millennials and Gen Z now entering the workplace, if you think about the way these generations were raised, they've had access to leadership since they were children. Okay. When I was growing up, my parents would be like, we're going on vacation to Florida.
Right.
And these days it's more like, Meredith, it's your turn to pick where we're going on vacation this year. So this is this access to leadership that is an expectation now.
Yeah.
So it's getting to know your people. If you have an employee who is brand new to the company, brand new to the industry, and they want to come in because they're like, I see some things that you can change around here.
Yeah.
And you are doing everything in your power to keep your eyeballs from rolling back in your head. But we're connecting with them. We're listening to what they have to say. And we're making that accessible leadership, knowing people by name and not sneaking a peek at their name sewn on their shirt.
Right.
Knowing something about them. Another great way to get started is I call the All About Me sheet. And this can be something you can do on SurveyMonkey. You can do something that's printed out. But it's actually, what's your favorite candy bar? What's your favorite hobby, sports team, favorite gift card? Because too many times, we go out, we get a couple $100 worth of $10 coffee cards, so we can say, hey, good job. But one person is like, that's not my brand of coffee.
Yeah.
Another person's like, I don't even drink coffee. And the third person's like, woohoo, coffee.
Right.
Where instead you can personalize it. Meredith, let me ask you, what's your favorite candy bar?
Oh my God. It depends on the day, but I would say Kit Kat holds true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a Kit Kat bar. So if I were to, you knock it out of the park and I give you a Twix, right Twix, actually, and you're looking at going, okay, well, that's good. It's similar. They look similar. It's chocolate. It's delicious. But if I give you a Kit Kat bar, there's something in your brain that's saying she's paying attention. And you may not even remember filling out that form 6 months ago.
Right.
So it's the personalization. I had one of my clients several years ago ask me, she was like, hey, Engineers Week is coming up. What can we do to show all of our engineers we appreciate them? I'm like, nothing.
Right.
This is not one size fits all. So it's being accessible. It's personalizing the recognition, and it's recognizing early and often and being specific in that. Again, there's going to be employees that you don't like for whatever reason. Maybe they remind you of the guy who dumped you in high school. Don't care, But when you almost do it like a science experiment, like I'm going to look to see when that person is going above and beyond based on what they've done in the past, and I'm going to specifically recognize them, you change the conversation.
Right.
So these are just the little things. Your culture didn't happen overnight, and it's certainly not changing overnight. So above all else, it's making the commitment. This is something I'm going to choose, committing to it no matter what happens, and playing it for the long game, because that's what culture is. It's the long game.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tracy in the chat box actually said, I did the All About Me with my team when I came on board, which is great. Tracy, I would love for you to elaborate on, what the outcome of that was, if your team actually followed up with any of it, if you got a favorite candy bar of your own at some point, that would be really great. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. While we, continue on, I want to talk a little bit about the scheduling solution aspect of it. So Lisa, why don't you tell me some of the experiences that you've had with different hourly wage workforce and flexible scheduling?
Well, I'll tell you, especially in manufacturing, you don't normally find like flexible scheduling and manufacturing, or flexible scheduling and retail and hospitality in the same sentence. And time is the only thing that all of us have in common with like Jeff Bezos and, Bill Gates and all of those people, because we all have the exact same 24 hours. So I was speaking recently at an event, and one of the guys there said that they have basically an anything goes plan. As long as you communicate with the leadership team, they do everything possible to be flexible. I had a woman that I interviewed for my book, and they went to flexible scheduling at her plant, and it's all about communication, where that the work has to be done. That you have to have all the shifts covered, but giving people a little bit more flexibility. I had one of my clients was talking about an app that they use for filling in for different shifts to take some of the burden off of their full-time staff, where they have short timers and part-timers, that it's almost like an Uber application. Like, oh, I can work Monday from 10 to 2. I can work Tuesday, whatever. I've seen companies go to having what they call mom shifts, which are from 10 to 2, because we've lost a lot of moms out of the workforce. So it's just looking at your business differently. I spoke at a roofing conference. And if you think about roofing, okay, sun's out, it's not raining, we're putting on roofs. This one owner, they put on roofs from Monday through Friday. Every one of their employees gets the weekend off, because what they found is that none of their competitors can compete with them, because those competitors expect their employees to work all weekend. And you think, well, did they lose some business? Yeah, probably, because they're not putting on roofs on the weekend. But are they more profitable? Absolutely, because they're not spending all of their time trying to replace hourly staff. So I think it's really looking at every single area of your business differently, communicating with employees. Maybe there's core hours, which everybody comes in on Wednesdays, or you have you can have the choice. If you work from 7 to 3, you can come in anytime from 6 to 8. You can leave anytime from 2 to 5. But it's that communication to make sure that we're covering the shifts, to getting the products out, to taking care of our customers. But too often, and let me preface this too, because a lot of you are going to have employees who will totally take advantage of you. Okay.
Right.
They are going to lie, cheat, and steal to get that extra time off. It's going to be like their 6th grandmother who died this year. We get it. But there's too many times that we treat everybody based on that 2 to 3% of our employees who are actually going to jack us. Why don't we err instead on the behalf of the 95 to 97 good, hardworking, loyal, dedicated employees who we know we can trust versus the couple that we can't?
Right. I think those are really, really great points. And, to kind of speak on what we do at Workforce, that's exactly it. We make it a lot easier for employees to essentially swap shifts between each other. You give them autonomy. And I think that goes a long way, again, in talking about that trust, that compassion aspect, and giving them an employee app so they can have control of their own schedules. They have their own flexibility in hand. And you talked a little bit about, that story of those who want to work the mom shift or those who want a longer weekend. We actually have a webinar later on next month on how to roll out a 4-day work week, something that's really trending in today's world. And it's hard, it's really hard to keep on track of that, especially for managers and, GMs who have a lot on their plate already. And on top of that, have to make sure that burnout's not going anywhere and, absenteeism isn't rising. Like, for us to be able to take away, the hardships of scheduling or working in that idea of flexible scheduling to better lower those turnover rates, I think that's, what we do best at Workforce. So, I really think you had some great points there. And I love the conversation that's happening in the chat. We see Robert offering up some suggestions. Kelly, I hear what you're saying. It's really hard to be able to track everyone. And I think that's where technology comes into a huge, huge play in it. So yeah, I think that's great points.
Yeah. And the nice thing about technology too is in the last couple of years, it has gotten so incredibly easy and user friendly. And I mean, you look at just the technology that we're using right here on this webinar.
Right.
How much more stilted and everything. It's user friendly. And there's so many apps out there, which is another reason to listen to your employees, because there's hacks that they have, there's things that they've seen, there's opportunities that you have at Workforce for different apps that just help people. And maybe some of your more tenured workers are a little bit more afraid of technology, but just, having those mentoring or reverse mentoring moments where you can have employees working together to show that, man, this tech is super easy.
Oh my gosh. I mean, especially from our end, intuitive technology is exactly where this company was built on. So making sure that we have clients that are in their 80s using our product from, teenagers who are 15, 16, 17 years old, just being able to adopt it like this, while we have the older clients, where they are able to adopt it almost just as fast. And it's pretty amazing. So I mean, it's pretty incredible what you can do in the user interface, all that good stuff. So yeah, I wanted to really quickly point to this graph. We've talked a little bit about the idea of incentives, and Lisa, we actually talked about this a little bit earlier this week, but talking about, what companies are doing to attract and retain workers and offering a flexible schedule or offering their employees more autonomy over their schedule is astronomically important. And it's huge because a lot of people tend to throw money at the issue. We're seeing raising salaries as a close second. We're seeing improving benefits, more PTO, gift cards, all that good stuff. Those are great, but they are often only have a Band-Aid, solution to really the end issue at the end of the day. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this and, kind of go from there.
Well, a lot of times when it comes to raising salary, now hourly rates are going up. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When you can make $24 an hour working at Target or get $1,000 signing bonus to join Amazon or whatever they're doing, it's going to be important that you are meeting market wages for what's going on in your industry. And money's not the be all end all that a lot of managers and owners think that it is, because consistently I will hear, I just can't find people, I can't pay them enough money to stay. And even from their attitude, I can say, I just look at them, I'm like, they're not leaving because of more money, they're leaving you, they're leaving your culture. We look at these companies that for 2 years their employees successfully worked from home. Okay. Yeah. They got the job done. They didn't have to commute. They were happier. They were actually more productive. And all of a sudden, these companies started saying, you're coming back. Yeah. 100% of the time, we're done with that. And employees are like, no, I'm not. Right. It's like, because there's this level of trust, and it goes into almost that baby boomer mentality of, if I can't see you, you're not working. Yeah. So we need to, like what you said, autonomy. And that is so important, but it's trust. It's trusting your employees that they're going to do the job that they're getting paid for. And when you trust them to do it, you know what? They're going to give you more effort. Yeah. They're going to do better, versus if they feel that you don't trust them and nothing happens, they will give you exactly. Yeah. They will do exactly the amount of work that they have, that they can get away with, so that they don't get fired, because you're probably paying them exactly enough so that they don't quit.
Right. Right. It's very true. It's very true. It's a really good point, actually. Have you seen any change in turnover or burnout when employees are given more autonomy over their schedules?
No, actually, when employees have autonomy, when they feel listened to, when they feel trusted, they're more likely to stay. I've actually featured Manny in my newest book, but Manny DeSantis is the president of Valley Fastener. He has 3 plants. And a couple years ago, he started to do the stay interviews that we talked about. And now Manny is a CEO with 3 plants. Okay. He's a busy guy. He doesn't have time to be doing all this stuff. And yet he made the time to sit down with every employee at all 3 plants. Now, the first time that he went around, employers are like, oh, I'm going to tell him exactly what I think that he needs to hear, because why is the CEO asking me these questions? But then Manny acted on some of those suggestions and gave credit where credit was due. And the employees were like, wow, he's actually listening to us. Right. So the second round, they got a little bit more forthright. And the third round, and I just saw Manny because they just had me back at this year's event. And he said that through all of this chaos the last couple of years, they didn't lose a single person to voluntary turnover. Not a single person, because they felt that they were listened to, because they felt that they were trusted. So that's the magic of just building those connections and trusting your employees and giving them autonomy, providing the tech, the resources, the apps, so that the work gets done, because we as companies, we need to be profitable and get the work done. But when we have employees who are engaged, we're going to be a lot more profitable.
Yes. Yes, there is no doubt about that. And that's exactly, where workforce fits into that. And it's so important to keep those turnover rates low, especially these days where the labor market's super tight and it's hard to get those talent, and more importantly, retain that talent. It's very, very difficult. And my hat goes off to, those managers who are really just doing God's work out there and making sure that the business runs smoothly every day. So I think that's really great points. And to everyone asking, yes, there will be a recording to this webinar. We'll be sure to send it out. Somebody from our team will reach out to you, so no worries there. Great. So I would love to, before we go into the Q&A, because we do have a good amount of questions, Lisa, what are 1 or 2 top tips, actions, or takeaways you can share with the audience to better schedule well understaffed?
Boy, well, again, asking employees what they want. Maybe you don't have the capacity to go to that almost anything goes type of mentality, but also listening to them. And one thing that we didn't talk about, which I think can help all the way around when it comes to retention, is investing in your employees, investing in training, letting them know that you value them enough to help them out both personally and professionally in their career. Find out where they want to go. And also, when you're recognizing people, have your milestones much shorter than you used to before. A lot of companies will start at like 5 years to start recognizing. Recognize it 1 year, because if employees will stay for 1 year, there's a good chance that they're going to stay for the next year. Also, finally, and this is, again, I'm kind of going all over the place, but that first day, make that first day magical. When that first person comes in, that you're taking them around, that you're giving them a lunch buddy, that maybe you're having a little reception to welcome them. Because if they show up the first day and their desk is a mess and none of their logins and the receptionist didn't know they were coming and they sit in a basement filling out paperwork for the first 4 hours, the chance of them staying with you for the long term goes down dramatically.
Right.
So there's so many things that you can do. And every workplace is different. Every culture is different. So it's really sitting down and asking yourself, where do I start? Where am I going to make the commitment to do the best that I can do to, again, moment by moment, interaction by interaction, start to change the culture.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I love that. To go into the Q&A section of this webinar, we have a long list of questions. Feel free to keep sending them in. I hope we can get around to all of them, but I'm just going to go in chronological order. Adrian, you sent our first question of the webinar. You said, is it wrong to thank all my employees besides the one that randomly disappears, doesn't work, and spends 80% of his time in his vehicle away from work? Just a hypothetical.
I don't understand the question. Is it wrong? Is it wrong to think bad of that person?
Is it wrong to show appreciation or gratitude?
Oh, you know what? If this person, again, make it a challenge to yourself to catch this person doing one thing well. Maybe instead of their report coming in a day late, they actually turned it in half a day early. So being very specific of catching them, because again, you may be the first manager that ever acknowledged that person. Maybe he's been a slacker at every single job he's ever worked at before.
Yeah.
But you made a point to just find one thing, one small thing. So no, it's absolutely not wrong to thank. It just has to come from a place of sincerity where you actually did catch this person doing something well and you actually are grateful for it. Because if you come in and it's fake, employees will see right through it.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And, I look at, for example, teachers who are teaching first, second, third elementary school levels. They have to go to work every day and they have students that might slack off and, might have some sort of attention, issue or something like that, where they just can't pay attention. They can't sit still. They have to work with them every day and they have to come from a true place of, I'm talking to a first or second grader, a young child, and how can I convey to them? And it's not to say you have to treat your employee like this at all, but kind of coming at it from that perspective of trying to find something to relate to them and being like, hey, how about we work on this together? I really appreciate you coming to work today. I appreciate you coming to school today. I see you did a great job with this, even if it's a very small thing. Coming from that sincerity is really important. So, I hope that analogy kind of helps. But I think, exactly what Lisa said is great. Awesome. And this isn't a question, but I actually did tag Kelly Stout's comment. I thought it was really important to touch on. She said, exit interviews are nearly impossible. Stay interviews are a little easier for us, but people don't elaborate and still don't feel like we know much more when we're done than when we started. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because we kind of touched a little bit on the hard aspects of exit interviews and how by the time you get around to them, people are typically out the door.
Yeah, well, in the stay interview, again, we go back to that authenticity and sincerity of really wanting to know about the employees. So 2 simple questions to get started with is, tell me 3 things that you like about working here. Because what that does is now that becomes fodder for you to attract more people, because this is what our employees are saying. I had one of my clients that they did a word cloud, and it was interesting because they were a foundry. So they asked their employees for 5 words that described their experience. And when you use a word cloud, the more times a particular word is repeated, the bigger it gets. So it was a foundry. So of course they had, hot and hard work and stuff, but they also had things like family was really big. Respect was really big.
Yeah.
So, just sitting and listening to the people. So that's the first question. Tell me 3 things you like about working here. The next question is not tell me 3 things you hate about working here, because that's not good. But the way that I like to phrase the question is, if you were a benevolent dictator for a day, what would you change around here? Or you can say, if you were me, what would you change? But so that is giving you the same information, but in a much kinder.
Yeah,
much kinder.
That's so interesting. I love that.
I don't know, that benevolent dictator, one of my friends used that, and I just got a kick out of it.
That's amazing. I mean, hey, if you want their ears to perk up, it definitely, I think that would work. That's great. That's awesome. Alice had an awesome question. I think it really summed up kind of the overarching goal of this webinar. And she asked, where's the line between practicing gratitude and forcing toxic positivity? And she put toxic in parentheses.
Gratitude really it has to come from a place in the heart. Toxic positivity is, to me, how I'm reading into that is that is, slapping on a happy face and happy, happy, joy, joy. And that whole Pollyanna, like everything's perfect when your life is just completely falling apart.
Right.
So in my audiences, I will tell people, I'm like, I don't know what you're going through right now. I share one story of a woman, and this was several years ago, and I was talking about a gratitude practice. She's like, Lisa, I got nothing. I said, did you wake up in a warm bed? She's like, yeah. I'm like, when you went down the bathroom, do you have running water and flushing toilets? Well, yeah. When you flicked on the light switch, did electricity happen? And she's like, yeah, but I'm still not feeling it. I mean, I couldn't get anything from her until finally, about 45 minutes into it, she looked at her nails. She's like, I like the color of my nail polish. That was all she had. I mean, 45 minutes, people kind of snicker, and it's like, oh no, think about what she's saying. There was nothing positive in her life. But when she was able to find the color of her nail polish, then it got a little bit easier. And then it got a little bit easier. So you start where you are. And sometimes, if you're finding the good with your employees, sometimes it might feel a little, unnatural. Right. And may feel uncomfortable because, I'm certified in the DISC personality assessments. And there's some levels that are less comfortable expressing their feelings, expressing, finding the good or having those conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes at the beginning it feels a little forced, but if you make that commitment, and again, you do it according to your personality. Number one, if you're a person like that never thanks people, I will tell people to start with the apology approach, which basically means that, what, Meredith, I have not been letting you know how much I appreciate what you do around here, and I'm going to make more of an effort to do so. Right. And so now that it's coming from me. I'm not just thanking you because I want to get more work out of you. So you start where you're at, and it's a practice that happens over time. Our brains aren't going to rewire overnight. Our culture is not going to change overnight. All we have control of is the day-to-day actions that we take, those moment by moment interactions with ourselves and with others.
I think that's great. And it's really comes down to basic interpersonal communication skills and, things that you could implement right after this webinar, or even work on. So I think that's great points. Robert had a really great question. He said, I'm currently working on employee incentives, with one of the incentives being perfect attendance. If the employee or employees have perfect attendance for the month, they will receive one full paid day off. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a little challenging, because I think it puts the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, and that you want to create the type of culture where employees want to have perfect attendance, where it's not feeling forced, because it's like, okay, I'm going to get a paid day off, so I'm going to come for this full month. Oh, okay, fine. I'll come for the full month so I can get the time off, but I'm just going to do exactly the amount of work that I do, that silent quitting that we talked about. So I think in theory, it's great because you're looking at that gift of time, but I would also try to address the issues why attendance isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Because there's something when employees are excited and engaged and love what they do and are inspired to be at work, they show up. And when they're not, it's a lot easier for them to, yeah, I don't feel well today. Because I know today's going to suck and I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Kirsten T asked, can you speak on how to show appreciation and encourage engagement when half of your team is remote and the other half is in office?
Well, number one, there's a lot, when you have remote and in office, there's a lot of us versus them. So we want to see what we can do to bring people together and have those personal interactions where people in the office are knowing more about the remote people. I know when I first started doing virtual trainings, I would try to close my office door so my cat Tinkerbell didn't come in, because it's very unprofessional to have a cat on video. I'm surprised she hasn't shown up yet. But
hopefully she makes a cameo at the very end.
And I got to
timing it perfectly.
Yeah. Well, I got to the point now, if Tinkerbell walks in, I pick her up, I show her to the camera, and then I get all the cat emojis and stuff. But there's things that you can do as far as, I know when COVID first started, we were going to virtual happy hours and we were doing all kinds of things like that where there's those interactions. So sometimes it's sending, it's sending lunch, it's door dashing lunch to your remote employees when you're having an in-office party. But again, finding out what employees like, because some people like coming to the office because they like the interaction, they like being around people, that fills them. And other employees are like, you know what, I'm perfectly fine working on my spreadsheets at home, and I don't care if I never get to shake another hand in my whole life. But they still want to feel a part of something. So I think that there's ways to just be creative. And part of that is going to be in those surveys that we talked about of what that looks like for our organization, so that people really feel connected with each other.
Yeah, definitely. And that perfectly segues into Tracy S.'s question. She said, we often have difficulty in getting staff to even respond to surveys for additional feedback. Any suggestions on how to get a better percentage of engagement and response? And, speaking from our side of things, we have seen consistency is key. And when people have those automated surveys from workforce being sent out right after they clock out for their shift on their phones, they get sent their shift feedback survey. And it's maybe 3 questions on kind of just gauging where you're at. And it takes them less than a minute to fill out. That is very, very important. And again, it gives them that autonomy over their schedule with their employee app in their hand, and lets them know, hey, this is kind of an expectation here. It sets the scene for how working there is going to be in a very, very positive way. And I think consistency really is where that falls into place. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, and you also have to show, and I'm sure that you do, how it benefits the employees. Because if it's only about the company, if it's only about productivity and profitability, you know what? They don't care.
It's a good
But
point.
if you're sharing with them, hey, the feedback that you're giving us is what really enabled us to put in a flexible schedule. You know what? Thank you so much for sharing the feedback. We realize we are going to do this now. And so really what you said was perfect, that it's short. It takes less than a minute because we don't want to have survey fatigue. But a lot of times why people aren't filling out the surveys is because they don't see any benefit to them and they don't hear any feedback. So making sure that, we really care about what you're feeling and thinking, and we want to provide the resources. And the only way that we can do that is if we hear from you. And maybe even make it a goal. Our goal for this survey is, 90%, 95% completion. And, I think about those thermometers that we used to have, when you're raising funds, how the thermometer is getting towards the top and it's filling out.
Yeah.
I know in a lot of polls, when I'm doing polls on here, that I can see, we have 85% of the people have got, come on, let's take it to 90. Let's see if we can get to 90. So there's that level of encouragement that, hey, we're there. This is our goal. And putting a realistic goal, because you're never going to get 100%, but you can get pretty darn close.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.